Welcome to the Propenomix podcast with Adam Lawrence, where property, economics and business advice mix to help you achieve better returns.
Good morning, beautiful people of the internet, and welcome once more to our Sunday special Property Chat Live. You are joined by myself, Jay Howard, Mr. Piotr Rusinek, and the awesome Adam Lawrence. Today you can see that we are missing the beauty between the beasts. Helen is off doing something super fun and exciting and has decided to leave us for today. So for those who haven't read Adam's Sunday supplement, what are you doing with your lives? Question one. And question two, what do you think about the theory of evolution with regards to your business, with regards to yourself, and maybe the larger question in a theological way? I think what we'll do is we'll let Adam, as always, kick off with the brief yet undertones of his Sunday supplement, and then we'll kick off with questions of evolution, which bounces back to why do we do all of this? Why do all of this?
Fantastic. Thanks, Jay. Today's point really is around, first of all, the evolution of the property investment market. I mean, not just buy-to-let, but I do go into some detail about buy-to-let and look at the mathematical side of things today, as I'm keen to do a lot of the time. Absolutely, and a little bit prone as well. Yeah. And then I do go on further to talk about, primarily how the market has started to move a lot more quickly. Now, quickly needs to be put into context. We're not talking about buying a house in the morning and selling it in the afternoon or something like that. But there's been more of note, more eventful, significant things going on in the past 3 years than there has been in the decade before that by some margin. So you saw a lot of that in COVID in general. It sped things up, it sped up the growth of a lot of tech businesses. It also sped up the insolvency of a lot of businesses that were perhaps hanging on to last century's most workable business models. And I think you're going to go on seeing that over the next few years. And then went on, as Jay said, to talk about evolution from a personal perspective. So personal development, so not just evolution as a property investor, but as a person. Some of the ways in which I feel that I've changed and some of the things that I've done, and then sort of invited everybody to consider their own positions and what they do to keep evolving as people. So
is this article this week like an evolution from your 500 words article for future of buy-to-let? I knew the 500 words wouldn't be enough.
That's interesting. Maybe that was part of the thought. But I suppose it's because this week's been half term, so it's been absolutely manic here. But it's also a good time for thinking about, okay, well, and maybe it's partially, it's the end of Feb coming this week. So we're 2 months, we're 1/6 of the way through the year, which is a bit scary. How's it going? Well, it was a bit of a slower start than maybe wanted or expected. We're sort of well underway now, but the sort of machine that's been working reasonably well and has kind of creaked and pivoted and changed and stuff a bit during COVID is taking another slight lurch. And it's more like, I feel in these situations, you need to be on top of your strategic shifts rather than letting it happen to you, I suppose. So on the part of the boring mathematical part of today was to say, look, in 2021, when the bond yields were down at basically zero, then a property that yielded 6% that you could borrow against at 3%, let's say, it still made sense to buy into that sort of stuff, even if you were paying probably the full market value or maybe even a shade more, although you were buying into a rising market. Today, buying into a falling market, and if the cost of capital from a mortgage is about 6%, and this is part of today's chat, the bond yield has evolved. I think it's a big call, but I think we've maybe now evolved into a bit of a trading range where you're going to see a fairly classic sideways marketplace between the bulls and the bears, and the big news. And to me, it's the big news because I've been banging on about it for 2 years. But the big news that inflation, whilst the transitory element has passed through at this point, we're still going to see a battle, you know. And also, the economy's no slouch. It doesn't just sort of lie prostrate on the floor and give up. You know, people carry on. They work. They sometimes get extra jobs. They do more. You know, the US sector in terms of restaurants and hospitality in general did very, very well last month, which is a funny month to do well, January, because, you know, the US is much like the UK in terms of follows a relatively Judeo-Christian path of the year, including a bit of Christmas action. Although Thanksgiving is the biggie, there's still that sort of slowdown. And of course, there's still Northern Hemisphere, so they still have winter around that time in the majority of the USA, which of course slows things down. Not quite as much as it slows things down in the UK because, you know, you go from Maine down to the Florida Keys or somewhere in Southern California, the weather's not so bad in December, you know. But still, it has an impact because sometimes on the flip side, I think we had those, what were they called, bomb cyclones or whatever, that were -40 and stuff like that. That'll sure slow down economic activity in a month like December, and that won't happen in a month like July, you know. So that needs bearing in mind as well. So there's an element of that. My favourite bit today was probably the quote in terms of the wisdom of crowds, but then the madness of mobs, and how you sort of harness that and refine it. So it's good to I think this is probably, we talked last week, didn't we, or the week before, about LBC and using it as a bit of a dip test to test the temperature of the nation. And I was marvelling this week, and I had a bit of time in the car, really how clever talk radio is, just kind of like continual reinvention of the same wheel, because they'll take a difficult question where there isn't a yes or no answer, and then they'll try and get yes or no answers out of people who just really emotive and you know, want to shout at the radio. And like Jay was saying, both Jay and I are listeners that fit into that pocket, I think, when we do dip in. But it's very clever to be able to do the same thing again and again and still make it relevant and make it quite engaging and interesting.
It's the devil's advocate. That's the reinvention that happens every single time, because with one caller they'll be postulating one side of the argument, and then we'll get them to go, oh yeah, you're right, that's a terrible thing. Then the next caller that comes on that agrees with them will go, well, think about the flip side, don't you think about this? Oh yeah, you're right. So they stand for everything and they stand for nothing at the same time, and that grates me. That like on a primal level, it grates me something rotten. And I get to a certain point where I'm like, beep, I have to put something else on. I can't stomach it. But it is brilliant, and it's like you say, it's a bit of a litmus test. You know, if there was the conversation the back end of the week, which is completely off topic, about the Shamima Begum kind of ruling that came out, and I think it was Sheila Fogarty that I was listening to at one point, and for the most part, I really like her. She's really well sensed. She can dip and dive between men hating and other things like that, but she kind of pulls it back every once in a while. But yeah, and at one point it was like, oh well, you know, they're not letting her back. You know, they let 500 people out of 1,000 back, and the majority were men. And I was like, well, my first question was, what is the percentage when you say majority? Of the 500 that came back, were 490 men? Were 250 men? Were 260 men? Like, what was the majority?
Well, and what was the sample size of what went out? Ultimately, this is one of the easiest ways that the media completely bastardizes statistics, you know, and they absolutely do it to get a reaction. And it's reprehensible because they treat mathematics in the same way that the politicians do, as something to serve them. Whereas really, the beauty of mathematics and data is that it doesn't lie to you, right? You might interpret it badly, or you might try and manipulate it. But I wish there was, you know, a rule or a service which just said, well, this is the real maths. Here are some conclusions you could draw, right?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
But this one looks likely. This one looks much less likely in terms of how it's all happened. But unfortunately, that is just far too dry to sell papers or get clicks or.
It's too reasonable. It's too reasonable. And I was looking at, I was thinking, she was making parallels. Oh, she's just a young girl of color. That's why you're not letting her back in. I said, well, I was shouting at the radio. I was not saying it to Sheila myself. No, they're not going to let me on air. I was shouting at the thing. I was like, name me one of the 500 other people that they've let back in. Name one of them. Name one of them that has a profile in the public stage. Because remember, when this whole thing kicked off with Shamima, I don't even know the name of her two friends that went with her. No. And I dare one of you to name them. You can't. It's not because she's female or she's brown or she's Islamic. It's because of what she did. And it's not just because of what she did. It's because she was high profile. People are upset because when this first kicked off, everyone was trying to bring them back. There was a whole national outcry to bring these young girls back, that they've been manipulated, they've been, groomed and all these other things. And they probably were. I mean, considering their ages, absolutely they were. But to just kind of say it's because she's a woman and she's brown that she's not coming back. No, if she didn't have the profile she had, she would have. They would have snuck her back in with the other 500. She would have been number 501. Yeah,
it doesn't further any of the debate to try and blame large-scale prejudice cards in this situation. Is primarily your point, and I completely agree with it. And I think there are a lot of problems with. I caught maybe whether we were listening to the same show. I'm thinking I was in the car Wednesday, maybe 2 o'clock till about 5 o'clock, maybe. So maybe that would have been when Sheila was on. So perhaps we heard the same thing. And I think one of the big things that really, and it annoys me because these points sort of don't get addressed, which they would be good debating points, but lots of people were. I can understand the sympathetic. She was only a child. She was this. She was that. Right. But the problem is you can't start saying that 15-year-olds don't know the difference between right and wrong, because our own legal system provisions for people to know the difference between right and wrong far younger than that. So the sort of complete absolution, regardless of whether you consider it trafficking, grooming, and as you say, these things inevitably went on, but the complete absolution is a problem. And you sort of have this argument where you've got victim blaming or victim shaming on this side, and then you've got, completely evil, knew exactly what she was doing on this side. And this is part of my point, really. The truth lies somewhere in between those two extremes. Yeah. But everybody who phones up is either one or the other, and it's just sort of like, can't we just show a bit of breadth and a bit of and have a proper, rather than like you say, it reminds me of American wrestling. And I took the kids on Thursday this week to go and see some wrestling locally, and it was utterly awful and utterly fantastic at the same time, right? But the point is, it doesn't. Everybody's a goodie or a baddie, right? Really over-exaggerated goodie or a baddie. Whereas in reality, lots and lots of people are somewhere in the middle. In fact, the whole of life is lived in the middle and at the centre of the middle, which is why Jeremy Corbyn gets blown out, but Tony Blair gets elected, or David Cameron gets elected, even if he's probably a bit of a wet lettuce after the first coalition government. Because people want to find some identification, and very few people are comfortable with being on the one extreme or the other. But the real issue, this is why people can't deal with Peterson, right? Because people want to put him on one of the fringes, but he dips here and he dips here. He goes wherever he wants to go based on what he deems to be the most logical interpretation of the argument and the data. And people just can't deal with that because they want to put him in a box and say, whereas I can't think of anything. It's like this irony of people saying, during COVID, a few people went off their canister and started talking about, the government trying to control everything they ever do and stuff like that. And the weird thing is, their argument would primarily be, you're all sheep and you're being told what to do by the mass media. And it's like, yeah, but you guys are all living over here and you've all got the same opinion about everything. Don't you find that? That's the strange thing, because you never disagree with each other anymore. You're just taking it from Breitbart or QAnon or where the bloody hell you get your information from and just drinking it in like a fool. So surely that makes you the bloody idiot. Whereas we're happy to have a debate about anything and cross the Rubicon in terms of the political centre as required. As the facts change, sir, I change my mind. What do you do? You know, this is the thing. But while we're on controversial subjects, might as well start talking about Bob Geldof on This Morning, Jay, to be honest with you, because I didn't see it because I'm otherwise engaged while This Morning is on.
But I tell you what, there's a lot of uproar about him, but then it extended to people being really upset with how Phil and Holly reacted to it. Apparently, bear in mind, they're on thin ice from how they cut the queue at the Queen's funeral or whatever it was that they did. You know what I mean? Like, the country were really not fans of, David Beckham stood in line for 15 hours or whatever the bullshit story was. But, they snuck in and snuck out in time for tea. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I respect people's decisions to do whatever it is they want, but when you say that, oh, you're really into fishing and you want to become a fisher instead of a fisher person, fisherman, fisherwoman, I start to lose a little bit of respect for the argument, not the larger argument and the core reasoning behind it, because I think there's validity there. Everyone has validity to their argument, whether you see it or don't. That's the beauty of leaving echo chambers, which is the point you were making earlier. Like, you just leave the echo chamber. I don't know what's right or wrong. It doesn't affect me. I'm not a person in that argument. I have no skin in the game per se, but I like to think I'm a genuinely good person and respectful. And if I was talking to someone, like Peterson puts this out perfectly, goes, I'm not going to audit or restrict or legislate my language, but if I'm talking to you one-on-one and this is how you present yourself and you're talking to me respectfully, I'm going to do the same thing, because I'm not perpetrating hate. I'm not perpetrating prejudice. I just know that you're going to talk to people on a level. And Bob clearly didn't get the memo. Just didn't get the memo. I mean, there's a chance that he didn't have a clue anyway. There are some celebrities that stay away from social media, newspapers, all of this, because they know they're going to see their name. They may not like what's said. They may see a friend's name. They may not like what's said. They just stay away from the drama. He just seems like he's old school. My gut feeling is he probably didn't have a clue.
Yeah. Wouldn't surprise me. But it was interesting to see. It's always interesting when you see the social media posts about it that have got thousands and thousands of comments, because, again, you kind of expect that to be a pretty good temperature test for what the nation is really thinking. And primarily, people were making some kind of joke or another about it, which I'm sure would offend some people in the very strong lobby side of things. But probably in many ways is the best way to, because I read about this stuff and I thought, the first thing I thought was, because there is this kind of tendency these days to get on high horses and judge people with incredibly high values that I'm pretty certain 95% plus of the social justice warrior movement don't hold themselves to that high standard in their everyday life.
Well, you can tell they don't, because of how they react to everyone else trying to have a conversation about it.
Well,
they have exceptionally low levels of tolerance for other human beings that don't fit their immediate and constrained worldview.
Yeah, you could pick on, I suppose some of the good examples of that would be, Nigel Farage would be a good example. I think I've personally described him in the past as a bin bag of a man. I have no time for him, but I fully support the system which allows Nigel Farage to exist. And I might also argue that, Nigel Farage is probably better than Tommy Robinson or Abu Hamza or anybody who lives, or Vladimir Putin, or anybody who lives beyond the norms on that scale, because it gives the debate a chance to be in the public domain, and usually by anybody, fairly moderate and fairly sensible, get picked apart and destroyed. Now, if you still want to follow Nigel Farage's preachings after that, well, I'd argue you're probably a blithering idiot, but you have the freedom to be a blithering idiot. Yeah. And crack on doing that, because that's the society we live in, not a China-style sponsored, state-controlled, we're going to watch your every move and we're going to have to watch what we say on social media. But I did look at it and think, I wonder if in 10 and 20 years' time, how this debate will evolve exactly, because it's very, very difficult, because it descends fairly quickly. Going back to the trans point, it descends
It's
very
very
quickly.
polarizing. Like,
And then, you know, talking about Shamima earlier on, a decision she made when she was 15. Well, what's the right age, if there is a right age, for some of these operations / puberty blocking things to take place? And that's incredibly difficult to answer. And I was listening to I listened to a couple of interesting things with Peter Hitchens on recently. One of them was Hitchens and Konstantin Kisin talking about the Ukraine-Russia war and what was going on. And they had a really, really significant difference of opinion. And Konstantin has got, you know, cultural skin in the game, let's say, and Hitchens does what he normally does, which is 80% really interesting and loquacious arguments, 20% pulling strange facts and historical things out of his you-know-where, which may or may not be relevant to the whole thing. And I also listened to Hitchens. What was the other thing I was listening to? It was, we talked about it the other week, I think. It was an interview with Aaron Bastani. So I like to try and stretch myself. And whilst I get quite annoyed by, you know, extreme is the wrong word, but significantly far left or significantly far right media annoy me to the same degree, right? Which makes me believe I probably live somewhere near the centre, but I can go anywhere I want because I'm a free individual and a free person, right? And Aaron Bastani, who interviewed him, did a really good job. And Hitchens basically, I thought, sort of tripped himself up on his difference between because he's very traditional Christian, I would say, in his views. He had a very different take on capital punishment and the argument that he put together for that versus the argument for pro-life versus pro-choice. We really are taking on all the big subjects in the world today, aren't we?
Yeah, wow, yeah.
But
we may get cancelled after this one.
it was really, really interesting to see how Bastani dealt with him, because he did a really good job on the pro-life, pro-choice stuff, and I thought made Hitchens just sound like a bit of an ideologue, really. But on the capital punishment stuff, Hitchens actually got the better of him fairly significantly, I thought. And Bastani is not it's a channel called Novara Media, if anyone wants to have a look at it. It does, you know, criticises Keir Starmer for being too right-wing. That's where it lives on the political spectrum. But it is interesting, and it is interesting, you know, sometimes it's a bit of I'm Jay listening to LBC, and I'm shouting at the YouTube because they're having people on talking about Marxism and why we should all crack on with the teachings of Karl Marx or whatever, and kind of ignoring the 100+ years of evidence that it didn't necessarily work as well as one might have hoped, let's say. And it's where Peterson gets into this really well, when people say to him, you know, well, we get told that one of the key tenets of capitalism is that inequality is necessary and healthy, right? And I mean, that's a complete lie on all the works on, you know, the philosophical works on capitalism that I've ever read. That's just invented by the left. But Peterson says, well, the thing is, every single system breeds inequality, and some worse than others. So go and look at the evidence of what it was like in the Soviet Union, what it was like in Mao's China, what it's like in Venezuela, you know, this is not an argument for capitalism being bad, right? This is just human beings are human beings, and the frameworks that you give them, there'll always be some who are going to bastardize them, use them to their own advantage, do all of this stuff, you know. So that's a coast to coast of the big stuff in the world going on right now. I tell you, that's pretty good.
Oh.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I think we all trod a fairly safe line there by saying it's not our monkey, it's not our circus. Essentially, we really went off on topics there, guys.
That was evolution of a conversation right there.
We put ourselves through the ringer a little bit there, I think.
certainly into the tank.
A good question for you, Adam, is I would say that through the course of the last 3 years, there's been quite a bit of pivoting. And are you seeing that those pivots is what enabled you to evolve, right? These are the small twists and turns and actions that were needed for you to evolve as not just a person, as a business, as a real estate investor. Is that kind of the direction that you're seeing? Or would you just think the natural evolution of today would have taken place less those pivots or less the number of pivots that you took?
Well, I think a lot of it had been market driven. I think we can be a bit like that and that's not necessarily, restricted to property. I think we can be a bit like that in like we can be a bit reactive. We can be a bit we can be a bit led by other things and other people, especially when, in 2019 I had a business that worked really well, right? And you turn the handle and you got stuff out at the other end and jolly good, everybody's happy. You've cracked it, if you like. 2020 completely changed that paradigm and the backdrop and everything else. And it sort of organically started to pull me around a little bit. There was, suddenly one day they've announced that bounce back loans exist. That changes the direction of what's happening that day for sure. And then it changes your financial structure. And it's actually changed our financial structure for the next 9 years, because that's the period at which they're paid back, which we've got, 7.5 years left of or whatever it is. But then at some point you realise, hang on a second, I'm now being told what to do by the little voices in my head or by the market effectively. And what I need to do is retake control and do some strategic thinking about what I'm going to do. And we don't have to always do this and we don't have to always do that, right? But what's the landscape look like and where and this is part of the reason why I think you grow your toolbox just as you guys have done in terms of the way that you can, Jay always talks about multiple exits when he does a sort of generic auction deals talk. But there's also multiple entries as well, right? And multiple ways in which you can construct deals. And there are times, such as late 20, early 21, where, with hindsight, you can see why people just piled into property because it gave them opportunity that doesn't exist today. Part of what I've talked about sort of this week, right? But this is why you evolve as a person and develop yourself because, before Genesis, I'd never bought a multi-use office, industrial and leisure site, right? Now, I had the right people, the right funding, the right everything around me in order to do that with confidence and do it reasonably well, yeah? But it's all extra tools in the toolbox around what was needed, and that's part of that evolution of yourself as a property investor and as an investor in general, as a person, because you need to keep building on those skills to be able to do I've talked before in the past about how I got very uncomfortable. I understand why it's done the way it's done in the property education industry, if you will, right? But there was a lot of pushing of lease options post the 2008 financial crisis, which were leading people to say, right, I'm going to go and look for options. Now, it might be the case that if you've got very small bankroll, right, then you do need to go out and look for options because you're not in a position to buy a property. You still might look at maybe packaging some stuff up and sourcing it on, for example. So I would try and put yourself in that tiny little box that the industry wants to put you in so it can sell you a course, and that's, I'd rather people understood how to see the opportunity within a deal and then maximize that opportunity with the best tool or tools that they have in the box. And that to me would be a real, masters in property investment or masters in property deals, and it doesn't have to be held for the long term. It can be flipped, it can be traded, it can be all of that sort of stuff. And that would give you the real set of skills that you need. But that would be, again, that's not a sexy 2-day course or whatever it is for £2,000 leading to a £50,000 mentorship, and that therein lies the problem,
Well, it's, you whatever wrapper you put it in, you're not promising anyone to become a property millionaire in the next year. Do you know what I mean? And it's the removal of that get rich quick rhetoric that a lot of them use. That means that the subject isn't attractive, because you can make any subject in property look attractive if you're promising someone they're going to be a millionaire in 12 months.
Yeah.
Which is why, rent to rent was so popular, I couldn't think of doing anything worse in my life. It sounds like a massive arse ache, and you own nothing.
It's a business. It's a complete trading business, you know, with lots and lots of moving parts and probably 24/7 access required to you to start with, which is not ideal, not the sort of thing that you would necessarily want to pick up. But I can see why people get into it. But although you're back to the Shamima argument, lots of them are probably groomed into it rather than thinking, right, I definitely want to get into it, and therein lies part of the problem. You know, that's the thing.
Indeed. Interesting. Well, it's I think rent to rent, there are times for rent to rent, and it's not about strategy like we said with other things, right? Because there will be times where it's good, but like just focusing on it is not the way to go. The same way it's like we tell people, like sometimes someone asked me a question recently, like if I was buying a place for myself, would I buy it in the auction or would I buy it from an agent? I really don't mind.
No,
the deal is the deal. What comes from eBay, either Amazon or auction or an agent or privately from someone, doesn't matter. Like as long as it ticks my boxes, it's something I'm gonna do. So we're not auction
exclusive.
Exclusive, yeah. So
fans, but not only fans, if you will.
Yeah, but it's. I don't think you can exclusively be doing one thing over another. You know, most businesses that you see that do really well have somehow either attempted to recession-proof themselves or bring in multiple streams of income or have two main points of focus. You know, you go back to the high street estate agent. Pretty much the ones that survive are just high street estate agents with a lettings and management business and a mortgage broker in there, right? That's how you take standard real estate sales from just here's an estate agent to no, here's an estate agent. Upstairs is the lettings guy. They do the management. You've got the mortgage advisor that's there Monday to Friday. The solicitor across the road is probably giving them a kickback. That's the kind of business in property that works. The standalone agents really struggle. They normally do it as like a mum and pops or just because they've been there for 50 years. But yeah,
or they focus on more high-end things and that pays once
ticket price
a quarter.
Well, yeah, we got involved in an agency acquisition before Christmas that was a pre-pack just before administration, and they were suffering from that classic, you know, probably 6 sales a month just to pay the rent, right move, the staff. And the thing is, it's not 6 sales a month because, you know, Q1 is always a struggle because December's been slow and then half of November's been slow. And that's why the only model that really works is this sort of franchisee where you're not having to pay the full whack for right move and this and that and the other, because 6 sales a month, 72. So imagine getting a business off the ground and doing 72 completed sales a year. It's a really, now obviously it can be lower in London because the fees can be bigger, but still you're much better off to be lean and to do it from the bedroom and to do all of that, because it's going to give you a fighting chance. And you're probably looking at a couple of sales a month to pay overheads or less, and then the rest of it is going in your pocket, even if 30% or whatever is going in the pocket of the franchisor or however they work their business models. You know, it's
I find it difficult to comprehend how to do 72 auction sales a year.
Yeah,
auction sales are much easier.
Some of the big auction houses struggle to comprehend how to do that at the moment, Piotr. But
that's facts, real facts, just spat out there with your camera off. That makes the other thing to remember with high street estate agency is when they're talking about 6 sales a month, they're talking about having that pipeline, right? Because how often do they go get an offer taken? The offer to exchange, the exchange then moves to completion. You're talking could be 6 months. So you're talking
10 instructions a month. So look at it that way. You're talking 120 instructions. And remember, we're only talking about breaking even here. We're not talking about a great business. We're talking about breaking even. So to tell a great business, you want 20 instructions a month. You know, it's incredible volume.
So by taking over that business, like what kind of things are you benefiting from, or what kind of things you're looking at
Well,
to make
we
this
did
worthwhile for yourself?
Yeah, so it was sales and lettings, and what we did immediately was get rid of the sales arm of the business because for exactly that reason. And the crazy thing is, we will benefit because there were, let me get this right, probably about 50 things on the market, right, which you'd expect to take out over 6 months, 50 or 60. And we gave them to a local agent and gave them the lion's share of that commission, because to them it was extra work on top of that pipeline, but they already had the overheads covered. And to us, it meant we could cut that £6,000, £7,000 a month's worth of overheads or whatever down to nothing immediately. So perversely, we're the only ones who'll benefit from that sales pipeline because it gets taken out without the overhead of taking it out, even though we've given away the majority of the revenue. Whereas the lettings is different. The lettings is just so much nicer and steadier, and all you've got to do. People change their letting agent less often than they change their bank. So all we've got to do really is not cock it up, and also defend from the initial approaches from people saying, "Oh, well, those guys went bust and blah blah blah," and it's like, well, us guys didn't go bust, and it's coming into a successful business. Thanks very much. Oh, and by the way, we can do quite a lot of things that the average letting agent can't. So if you're interested in growing your portfolio, developing stuff, this, that, and the other, you might want to talk to people who've done several hundred deals rather than someone who hasn't even got their RLPM level 3 in property management, which of course we also have as well, like that. I've got to get in the car, guys, so I've got to get in the car. So, but I'm going to stay on. Hopefully, the connection will hold up for a bit. But I'm just going to go on mute for a bit.
Okay, brilliant, Adam.
Well, you can't really argue too much with that. I mean, sales, bloody tricky stuff, especially for estate agents. But that whole blending it across all of them, I think if you are going to have a sales office as an agent, you do need to marry it up with a lettings and management, a mortgage broker, that kind of thing. I mean, one of the things Adam said there, which was, the evolution is part of the market conditions. I was going to say, well, actually, in biology, in the term of evolution, it is the environment that dictates the evolution. Does your food source go? Does it climb up a tree? So now you have to climb up a tree. Does it go from being in the water to being on the beach? You're forced to make those moves.
But also, you create your environment.
You do, yes.
So then the environment then creates you. And then so you choose the things that then impact you to evolve, progressive evolution.
It's a bloody deep place to go there, Piotr. Jesus Christ.
But it is true, because I know, for myself, if I spend time around people that I know have habits that don't support my habits, that's going to be bad. I'm not saying I shouldn't be spending time with people that have different habits than me, but I'm saying that if I do it too much, then it will impact what I value, or it's how I do things in my life. So I am quite kind of conscious of where I spend my time, and at the same time, where I live, for example, is an important thing, because I chose not to live in the city center because there's just too much noise and too much everything. So I chose to live outside where it's quieter, and then it's still close enough to the city centers. Ticks all my boxes. So that makes me probably go for a different evolution than I would go through in a city center. So there's a lot of things like that, I think, that make you make different choices. And we have an idea as well of possibly acquiring or expanding a little bit in our business that would help everything out. It's very early on to talk about this.
Surely it's too early to talk about that. I mean, even my mind was like, what are you about to say?
I know.
We've got to keep some things back. There's got to be an exciting build up for that. I think that's
I'm just talking. We're thinking about something.
You're ruminating the idea of it out there. Just kind of okay.
That's what I was doing exactly. Yeah, but that's brilliant, and I think businesses have to do things that are like complementary in order to make themselves way more agile in the environment and kind of absorb
I think
shocks.
it's also, you're a big fan of this word. It's also about creating synergy and synergies with other businesses. Do you know what I mean? Like as a business, you can't stand alone as an island. As a person, you can't stand alone as an island. You know, so it's about finding those complementary businesses and services where there is that kind of support that kind of goes backwards and forwards, right? There are some of those things which just goes one direction, but it's
So question.
Oh no.
Question. So when you think it's important to where it's more important to do the evolution, where it's more important to do revolution? When it's time for evolution, when it's time for revolution.
Look, I'm a Viva la Revolution. I'm that guy 7 days a week. I want to see it flipped on its head. I want to see if it works back to front. I want to see.
Jake Guevara for nothing. That's all I'll say.
That's it. Yeah. Look, I mean, you need to evolve, right? Survival is dependent on your ability to adapt. Adapt is the smallest form of evolution you're going to pick up. So, does revolution necessarily adapt you or change the status quo? Not always, because you don't know if you're going to win a revolution, but evolution always wins. So sometimes you can force the hand, and sometimes you just have to be forced. But I think when that is. Like, there are certain times when it's super painful and you feel like you have no control. That's evolution. When things are stagnant and slow and you need to find a way to pivot, fix it up, change it, whatever, that's when you revolt. That's when you start that revolution against whatever the status quo is and try and force an evolution out of the situation.
Do you think it's quite the opposite? Like when there's like a lot of pain, then like you're more prone to do the revolution because you just need to explode and like make things happen. And then when it's like things are steady, like that's the evolution bit, because like it's like just little incremental changes that make things move forward.
I think you're talking.
I think we think completely opposite.
I'm up here in the macro, right? I'm like, you cannot stop the waves from crashing, right? So you can't revolt against that. So that's just happening. It's painful. There's no stopping it. You just have to go with the tide. And then there's the other things where you're like, right, what I want to eat is up that tree. I now have to climb that tree. And those are the two different ways to look at it. My opinion.
Interesting. Okay. Few comments. Dominic saying, hasn't the failure to complete gone up from 1/3? Pretty sure it's like at 50% now. From agreeing something to then that thing not going to completion. Even in auctions, there's more kind of examples of people not paying the deposits or kind of having second thoughts, like even after exchange of contracts. So definitely an ability for people to get finance the rates that are kind of close to what they were before, that also changed. So yeah, I like Ivona's comment. Very good comment.
You know what? I like Ivona's comments as well.
Yeah. And Matt said sustainability. I'm not sure that's exactly what that was referring to. It was like 3 minutes.
That may have been in relation to the estate agent having the lettings agent and because it's sustainable, right? Or synergies create sustainability. Maybe. You have to give us some more words on that one, Matt. I think we're trying to guess.
Yeah. So, Jay, this could be a subject for the next 500 words article thingy, maybe in the future. But do you want to announce the winner for the competition?
Yeah. I'll announce. This was supposed to be. We were supposed to have done this on Monday about midday, but I was so abjectly disappointed with all of you that no one got even close. And even after I told everyone the first author was ChatGPT, there were still 3 more guesses after that guessed the first author incorrectly. So you've all lost. The problem is we can't afford the number of wooden spoons for the number of guesses. So no one gets anything this time. All right. But to make up for that, that sounds terrible. On the flip side, we purposefully and unshamefully didn't make that easy for anybody. I'm of the opinion that Adam tried to write like me. I tried to write like Adam. Piotr didn't. Well, Piotr did what Piotr did, and I think everyone got Piotr wrong. But just to go through it, so everybody knows, it's now going to be down here for everybody to know. So Sigma, the author Sigma was ChatGPT. Lambda was Helen Chorley. Omega was me. Alpha is Piotr. And Gamma was Adam. That's how wrong you all were. Painfully so. But like I said, we didn't make it easy. We did try and change things up a bit. I think most people got ChatGPT or GPT. Most people got ChatGPT correctly. Most people kind of saw that it was a little too formulaic, and there were a couple of technical bits that were incorrect, because obviously the free version of ChatGPT is only up until like 2021. And as Adam has said, as everyone knows, so much has changed in real estate since then. But I think we're going to do a couple more challenges. I think we've got a couple more things, ideas in the background. So kind of, hopefully everyone enjoyed it. Hopefully everyone can appreciate the fact that we made it a little tricky. And hopefully people will enjoy playing along next time. I think you're on mute. You're on mute, Piotr.
Yes, it was really difficult with that competition, because even I got things wrong. And I knew who I was, and I knew who ChatGPT was, and still got it wrong. So yeah, it wasn't easy.
It wasn't easy.
It wasn't
no,
easy.
But hopefully it was fun, and you got 5 perspectives for free. So there you go.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Well, so let's see what the future competitions are going to be like. Yeah, next week we should have both Adam and Helen back in, and yeah, we'll discuss more current news subject, property stuff, and yeah, if you guys have any subjects that you want us to cover, drop them in the comments, because your suggestion, we take a lot from the comments and suggestions from people who listen to it. So yeah, it will be good to know what you guys want to hear about. Cool. Shall we stop here? Let everyone enjoy this Sunday.
Yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic week ahead.
Brilliant. See you later, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Propenomix podcast with Adam Lawrence. To keep up to date with the ever-changing markets, please subscribe or follow me on LinkedIn, Adam G. Lawrence.